A vast there, a vast.
Watch it, you'll hurt her.
Oh, yeah, I'll let you know. Her is a him. See, it likes to smoke. So, you're just a landlubber, ain't you?
Oh, yeah, well, I'm a woman.
Oh, yeah, well, I am a mother. Yeah, let me pee. Oh.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. See, he wants me to. You must have an IQ about 500,000, don't you? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, good.
None of that baby talk around me, son. My son's going to be a man infant, not a baby infant. Isn't that right? Oh, come to Papa, me little sweet pea.
Oh, yay.
You're me little sweet pea, oh, me little sweet pea.
Sweet pea? You're bats.
Oh, yeah? I found him in Sweet Haven. That is why he's me sweet pea. I am calling him Sweet Pea, and that is his name. Ain't that the truth?
Yeah?
Yeah.
Well, Sweet Pea's about the worst name I ever heard on a baby.
Well, what do you want me to call him? Baby oil?
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Movie Oblivion, the podcast about feature films based on comic books and comic strips that people have stopped talking about. We are your hosts, Jordan and Kumar, that's me.
And me.
And this week we're talking about Popeye from 1980.
Oh yes.
I watched this as a kid, then watched it 2 years ago, July 2021, I wrote down. I put a post on the Deconstructing Comics Facebook page and said, should I watch this or not?
Yes.
And some people were like, yeah, this is great. And some people were like, this is terrible.
Right.
And I saw a post last week on another Facebook group about movies, and some people were like, wow, this is such a great movie, and other people were like, this is terrible. Anyway, we'll get around to all that stuff.
You say you watched this in 2021.
Yeah.
And dare I say, a seed was planted that day.
Yes, so that was the seed of this podcast, because I watched the movie, and spoiler, I really laughed the whole way through, except for maybe the last 20 minutes, but we'll talk about that. And I thought, how come when people have comic book movie podcasts, they're not talking about this one? Because I've read the comics. I read the big, like, when Fantagraphics put out this big collection in 2007, which is like the size of my torso.
Take 3, yeah.
It came out in 2007, I think, and I read this. And this new one that was just the Sundays just came out a year or two back, and I bought this. So I read Popeye before, and I was just kind of surprised that no one was doing a comic to film comparison. People were just talking about it in itself, I guess.
Yes.
They weren't talking about it in the context of its origins, or even in the context of the cartoon, which is another thing
As we're going to find out, I dare say.
We should do a pause the podcast.
But this is where it all
began. Are there any spoilers? I don't. Yes, this is where this movie, and then Friday Foster was like a clincher. When I heard about the existence of this, I was like, how come I haven't heard about this? Nobody's talking about it. Why isn't there a podcast for Friday Foster and Popeye? And this is it. And so we're kind of at this is episode 53.
Yep, so it's about a year.
We had a few skip weeks because of Christmas and stuff. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like our 1 year anniversary. So we're back to like an inspirational.
Perfect. Yeah. Friday Foster was the very first, and a year in,
yes,
it's Popeye.
It's Popeye. That's right.
Pause the podcast? No, don't pause the podcast.
Yeah. There's no spoilers.
Well, there is. The mysterious identity of the Commodore.
Yeah. Okay. No, don't.
No.
Actually, that's kind of spoiled. No, he does. He.
Have I spoiled it already? Well, it's obvious to anyone that has
Popeye meets his dad in the comics around 1933.
No one's read the comics.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. Yeah. So, but you have no excuse in the sense that it's been spoiled. It got spoiled in 1933. That Popeye meets his dad, whose name is Poop Deck Pappy.
Yep.
But in the comic, he uses his magic dog Jeep. Eugene or Jeep
I think it's Jeep.
Jeep. He uses his magic dog to locate his dad, and then he finds his dad, and his dad's like really rude to him, but he convinces him to come back with him, and he comes back with some mermaids that he has
craziness.
That he has like wooed or something like that at the same time. So that's the kind of stuff.
So there you go. It's just been spoiled for you.
Yeah, but the mermaid stuff doesn't
not having read the comics.
Yes, you should have read
these comics from the 1930s.
Yeah, and I actually think even though these really beautiful giant hardcovers from Fantagraphics came out, they did another set in the 90s. This one's only from 2007. I don't know that they're in print anymore, and they're big, expensive things that are hard to find a place for in your house anyway, and they're pricey.
Yeah, these are big books. I'm looking at them. Yeah. The larger one. The 2007 one is poster size.
Yeah.
It's like A3 size.
Yeah.
It's a big book.
Yeah, very big book.
All right, well, take us back to the start.
Okay, so
tell us about Thimble Theatre.
Thimble Theatre. So this cartoonist E.C. Segar, full name L.Z. Chrysler Segar, he signed his name, always had a little cigar at the end because it was Segar. He started this comic strip in 1919 called Thimble Theatre, which was about a troupe of actors, like a repertory theater, and they would do like movie parodies and stuff every week, starring the cast of characters, including Olive Oyl and her brother Castor and whoever else was in it, and Ham Gravy, her boyfriend, shows up at some stage. But at some stage, pretty early on, he dropped the theatrical parody idea and went straight to continuity strips. So we'd have ongoing storylines going on. I don't know if it was really a humor strip because there weren't really punchlines. The humor was from the kooky characters that were populating the weird stories that were happening. Olive had a boyfriend named Ham Gravy.
Yes. He was I believe, the main character for the first, 10 years?
Yes, that's right, yeah. He was the main dude. But in January 17th, 1929, suddenly we're introduced to this character called Popeye, who is a sailor that Castor Oyl, Olive's brother, hires to take him to
Dice Island.
Because he has a magical bird which he's inherited from his uncle, and if you
Beatrice the Wiffle Hen.
Beatrice the Wiffle Hen. If you rub Beatrice's feathers on her head, you get good luck. So he wins, and they hire this sailor.
There's a story that goes. It's also unkillable. It's an African.
That's right.
Wiffle Hen.
Yeah.
And it's unkillable. And I think there's a story that goes for what feels like a year, where Castor Oyl is trying to kill the Wiffle Hen in order to get $1,000 for having killed the hen.
And then other people are trying to steal the hen from him that know what it's worth. He doesn't know what it's worth until the end. He finally realizes how good luck it is. He goes to this island.
Well, that's why everyone's trying to steal it.
That's right.
They know the secret.
That's
if you rub the head of the Wiffle Hen, you get... It's like the potion in Harry Potter.
Yeah.
The Felix potion. You become very lucky.
Yeah, and he uses it to rip off Popeye of his weekly wages week after week because Popeye's a gambling addict. He can't stop playing craps.
And Popeye eventually uses it to save himself from 16 bullet wounds.
Yes, this is a key point actually because he's shot and he rubs the head of Bernice and that saves his life.
Yeah. He's meant to be a one-off character, but
he's meant to be a one-off. But I will note that E.C. Segar had transitioned into a continuity strip instead of doing this parody strip, and he was placed at exactly the right time because in January of 1929 we also had the debut of Hal Foster's Tarzan and Buck Rogers, and 3 weeks later they debuted on the same day, which I think was January 1st or something, and then 2-3 weeks later Popeye appears in the strip. He disappears. The fans are in uproar. They want him to come back into the strip, so he comes back. And in the dailies, he's usually hanging out with Castor. Castor's usually got some scheme of some sort going on. There's a lot of traveling to islands. He ends up winning $30 million because they go to this gambling island, and he's got the magic hen.
Yes.
Then he's got to invest that. He puts in a bad investment in a brass mine. He goes to this place.
Brass mine.
He goes to the place with a brass mine. Then they have to...
Brass is an alloy.
There's a lot of... I can't remember all the storylines that... A lot of stuff happens. One thing leads into another. Like they escape, they find a male Wiffle Hen, they get back to land, this scientist wants an egg from the Wiffle Hen, so there's a whole storyline about that. Then there's a whole storyline where the scientist sends them to this house which has a force field around it, and...
Force field?
Yes. And then they discover he's built this device, which is he transfers his soul with another guy, and this is all
this is craziness, and it's very coherent, the plotting.
Yes.
So this sounds incoherent. This sounds like craziness, week to week craziness, but everything is plotted in advance.
Yes.
It's very... It organically moves from strip to strip, and in point of fact, with each, he always introduces the next day's strip at the beginning of the previous week of day's strip.
And then the beginning is a recap of what's happened so far. So it's like that's the way you're supposed to structure days.
So
there's 6 panels though, each one. We should
sometimes 5, usually sometimes 6. But this couldn't be more different to last week's effort, Harold Teen, which was just stumbling all over the place with things that went nowhere.
Yeah.
This, on the other hand, is tight.
Yeah. In fact, in the storyline with the magic device, he starts with a text panel which says, "You're about to read the greatest mystery ever written. Clip and save these strips." Like something like that. Like he's got, I don't know, like how's he going to work this out? And yes, it is a magic machine at the end, which we knew it was kind of, what else could it be? As a modern reader, you're looking back knowing it's got to be a magic device. I love Popeye's reaction to it at the end when he realized what it is, where he says, "What a age! Aeroplanes, radios, seedless oranges, and now this."
Seedless oranges.
Yeah.
Now this.
So a bunch
These
of
yeah.
characters are introduced. There's a referee in the Sundays. So the Sundays...
Remind us again, what's the difference between dailies and Sundays?
Okay, Sundays, your daily is your one strip, which is, in the case of Popeye, 6 panels in a row in black and white. And your Sunday is could be a half page or a full page if you're a prestige strip, which is going to be in color.
Okay.
Oftentimes, Sunday would be a recap of the dailies, but in color, for a lot of different strips. But not in the case of Popeye. In the case of Popeye, they were basically independent of each other. When we get to the Sundays with Popeye, it's all about him romancing Olive Oyl, and her wanting him to stop fighting, and he just can't help himself. He gets in a fight every chance he gets. Then he gets into prize fighting, etc., and all this kind of stuff is going on at length in the Sundays, which has nothing to do with the daily strips where they're going off to different islands and finding these magic things and another Whifflehan, and then they crash, they end up stuck on some other, I can't remember all the things that happen. A lot happens. I only read about 2 or 3 years worth of continuity. I think this first Popeye hardcover has 2 years in it, the Fantagraphics one. So if you...
It's clever. It's cleverly plotted.
Yes.
You can see that he's put in a lot of work thinking about where the story is going to go.
Yeah.
It never... Things don't appear apropos of nothing. The groundwork is always laid. It's complex, it's sprawling, but it always makes sense. It's very clever. It's very... This guy's obviously brilliant.
Yeah.
Segar.
So he starts introducing some new characters, including, very importantly, one we all know, J. Wellington Wimpy, the hamburger lover.
I'll gladly play you Tuesday for a hamburger today.
Yes. So he's introduced in 32 in the dailies and 33 in the Sundays, but he's actually a referee of prize fights. That's how he's introduced without a name. And then they go to this Roughhouse Cafe. It's called the Roughhouse Cafe because it's run by a guy named Roughhouse. And he's just kind of hanging out in the background. But eventually he really takes over. Castor leaves the strip. Castor forms a detective agency somewhere out west and lives on a ranch. And we almost never hear from him again, apparently. And he's kind of taken over by Wimpy, who is this crazy character who's obsessed with hamburgers and is constantly trying to cheat money out of Roughhouse. Or he steals money out of the cash register in one strip. There's a great strip where he is invited... No, he wouldn't have been invited, but Olive Oyl is having a party. Every time she has a party or tries to make a nice dinner for Popeye, he invites somebody else along. Some rough dude. For some reason, she's having a party. He brings Wellington along. His pants fall down at the party. And he's Wimpy he's the opposite of Popeye. He's very highfalutin with everything he says. And he's like, oh, I need to eat. I haven't eaten. That's why my pants fell down. So he scams Popeye into buying him hamburgers so his pants will fit. Yeah. But then we smash cut to the next party and his pants are down again. And he's like, oh, I haven't had hamburgers again. So it's just like this running scam that he's got going for a whole Sunday strip. Sweet Pea, the baby, the orphan baby that was left on their doorstep, is introduced in 33. All these things are around 33. And pretty soon we get Eugene the Jeep, which is a magic dog, the Sea Hag, and the strip, I think the day... So... E.C. Segar died in 38, so not even 10 years into the...
He was quite young, in his 40s.
Yeah, I think he was 43, and so he'd only had Popeye for like 10 years, 9-10 years, and then he passed away. It was taken over by other cartoonists who, it's debatable how good they were at the strip or not. But the Sundays the Sundays were continuing until 92, I think I wrote there, or was that when they finally...
Now they just do reprints. But they were still original stories.
So there's still Sunday
92.
now. The daily stopped in 92. That's what it was.
Okay.
Yeah. And Bluto appeared as a one-off character in September of 32 and never returned. But the Fleischer brothers made a Popeye cartoon, which ran from 33 to 42. They did 109 cartoons. Popeye was voiced by Billy Costello. And every cartoon ends with... Okay, so Bluto is the villain, I think, in every one. He's competing for the affections of Olive. I guess they just took the name of this one character. They just had to pick a character out of a hat. One random character out of the strip. They picked this one.
So he wasn't an important character.
He was not at all. He was just a one-off dude.
But he is an important character in the cartoons.
Yeah. And so they did 109 of these cartoons. And at the end of every single one, as far as I can remember from the ones I saw as a kid, it ends with Popeye opening a can of spinach, eating it. It's just like Voltron, when Voltron forms his magic sword at the end of the episode. I'm like, why did you form it at the start of the episode and get this done with? No, he has to wait to the end of the episode for whatever reason.
It's like reverse kryptonite.
Yeah. To eat his spinach. Now, there's almost no mention of spinach in the comics. There's one or two. The reason he survives that first shooting is because he rubbed
the hair of Bernice.
Yeah.
Spinach isn't involved.
No, there's no... But later on, he has a couple of... Early on in the strip, pre-Popeye, between 1919 and 1929, spinach was always mentioned insultingly in a few instances. It wasn't until afterwards that there's like one or two instances where he says, I get me strength from spinach, which seems like it's a joke, maybe, because the strip has always insulted spinach up to this stage or something. It seems like a one-off kind of joke. But then there's a Sunday where he falls into a field of spinach. He's being beaten up by 20 guys, and he says, even I can't beat 20 guys. And they pummel him, and he lands in a field of spinach, and he eats it all, and then he beats up these guys.
Yes.
So at that stage, okay, he says he's getting vitamin A's or something like that.
Vitamin A's.
But there is a daily continuity where he takes over a country, he becomes king of this country, and he feeds his troops spinach, and that's how they get their power. So it's sometimes there, sometimes there, but it's certainly not.
It's not like
every
the
time.
cartoons.
No.
So I had never read the cartoon, these comics, ever before this week. Yeah, okay, so you might, for people of our age, we know who Popeye is.
Yeah.
People younger than us maybe don't really, but it was certainly around in the 80s. I think the most recent comic cartoon finished in 83.
Okay.
So I was 2 years old in 1983, but I was aware of it.
Yeah.
And I saw the Popeye movie, but that certainly wasn't the first time I'd heard of Popeye. But what does everyone know about Popeye?
Yeah.
He likes spinach.
He eats spinach and he gets super strong.
He eats spinach and gets superpowers from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. As you say, it's not really a thing in the comics.
He's just super tough.
He accidentally, he's just really tough.
He's
a tough sailor.
Yeah, exactly.
He hates spinach, in fact, and he only eats it by accident.
Yes.
When he falls into the spinach. Something that's carried over to the movie.
Yes.
Incidentally.
Yeah.
Which is good.
I don't know if he hates spinach in the comics, because it certainly came into it more, especially after the cartoon started. It maybe was influencing the strip. But nobody's really sure why E.C. Segar started putting the spinach in the strip in the first place, because there's some speculation that maybe during the Depression he wanted kids to have better nutrition, so he was promoting it. And it actually, spinach sales did go up because Popeye was so popular.
I got some statistics, well, not statistics, but I did read a bit about this. It more or less single-handedly revived the spinach industry in the US.
Right.
In the 1930s. And two towns in America claimed the title Spinach Capital of the World.
Okay.
Alma
Okay.
in Arkansas and Crystal City in Texas. And both have many statues of Popeye.
Wow.
And references to Popeye in the naming of their public spaces and buildings. Crystal City's statue of Popeye was apparently first erected in 1937.
Wow. Okay, very interesting. So so you can see how the cartoons were doing at that stage.
So if I was a parent wanting my kid to eat spinach, I'd say, eat your spinach, it'll make you strong like Popeye.
Yes, strong like Popeye, absolutely.
In the computer game NetHack, there are tins of spinach. When you eat it, it increases your strength by 1 point.
Okay.
And it says this makes you feel like Popeye.
Okay, so we've mentioned that he really loves fighting. I think even at one stage he says... All I ask is a scrap now and then, is something he says at one point. That's all he wants in life, is to fight people. The strip is wall-to-wall violence, by the way. It's really, reading it, I felt like this is Fist of the North Star meets Little Abner, is what Popeye is. 'Cause,
without blood.
Yeah.
No one's head bursts.
No, but he's constantly beating people up.
Yes.
He loves the neighborhood kids and they love him. He's always telling them stories and they're always supporting him. He's a credit hog. So sometimes Castor will do something, some achievement, he'll work something out, and Popeye will show up and say, oh, I figured that out because of this and this, when Castor's not there until Castor shows up and calls him on it. He is addicted to playing craps, as we mentioned. Yep. He can't resist.
And he has a squint, so...
Yes, one eye in the comics. We're told he's a one-eyed sailor.
Yep, he only has one eye, and, one is perpetually closed.
Yeah.
And he's ugly.
Yes.
People often make reference to how ugly he is. In his first introduction, he's told that he has a face like a shipwreck.
Yes, and his father tells him the same thing when he meets him. And he has to pull up but in the comics, his father looks exactly the same. He has to, pull up his nose because his nose... he can't kiss people because his nose goes over his chin or something like that, they say. Right. So he has to literally pull up his nose lift his nose to kiss girls.
That's great.
He makes... In the Sundays, he makes promises to Olive Oyl every week, sometimes 3 or 4 times in one week, that he will stop fighting. He's going to give up fighting. And immediately they go out and get a fight, and Olive Oyl will get in a fight. He's always got his pipe. And I will say the Sundays especially... I mean, I love the dailies, but the Sundays are fire. And
they're very funny.
The relationship between him and Olive Oyl is so great because they're so completely mismatched and yet so perfect for each other in some bizarre way. I don't know how he worked out this relationship, but she's always calling him, and they're always back together. He asks her dad for her hand in marriage multiple times. It's like the previous storyline just doesn't resolve. It just goes back to that gag again. We ask him, and the dad says, yes, of course, and then she's like, you have to give up fighting, over and over.
It's so interesting because she's a character that had been around for 10 years before Popeye was even introduced.
Yeah.
And yet, once Popeye appears, they click into these roles. And she's quite rambunctious in the pre-Popeye strips, isn't she? Like she's slapping around ham gravy.
Yeah, for sure.
She fakes she pretends to be mad in one story. Yeah, she pretends she has lunophobia.
Right.
Throwing herself around, and then but when I think of Olive Oyl, I think that she's really highly strung. She's always complaining.
Well, she does complain about she doesn't complain about his behavior. She tells him, I'm not going to marry you until you fix your behavior. And he's like, okay, I promise. And then they go for a walk, and then he beats up somebody on the street, and then some girl comes on to him for some reason, maybe, and then Olive Oyl will pick a fight with that girl.
Yeah.
Or something like, some kind of hijinks like that will happen.
So, I mean, here you go. Sometimes you got to give something a chance because it might take 10 years to get good.
Yes, yeah. And also, I mean, especially with the old guys and the daily strips, it took them a while to find their feet, which we've talked about that many times.
This was almost the new art form at the time, wasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. He mixes up his T's and K's all the time. Every time he comes up with a new word, it's really funny. The first time you hear him say, I demand an apology, or I have sex appeal too. What are some other ones? Oh, hippopotamus, he calls it.
Treat me as something scandalum.
Yeah. Hippopotamus. And the reason I sweared often fighting is on account of women thinks it's vulgar. It was one of my favorite ones.
Vulgar.
Yeah. It's hard not to read them in Billy Costello's voice because it's really...
Of course.
That's how you associate.
He has that voice. I mean, even people that I think in this age, in this time, who maybe you've never seen a Popeye cartoon sort of know the Popeye voice.
Yeah. I also wondered if Coinky Dink was did that come from Popeye? There were a couple of words that were I feel like they're almost in common usage. That I was like, did that come from Popeye?
Oh, and another thing, while we're talking about the way it's written, this stuff is so easy to read.
Yeah.
His malapropisms are always...
Yes!
You don't struggle through them. Like, compared to last week with Harold Teen.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it was like wading through molasses, trying to make sense of the dialogue.
And I was wondering why, and Little Abner too, why does it work in Popeye and Little Abner that we can read the malapropisms and the weird phonetic... It's not so much phonetic, but he's mispronouncing words, and it's somehow... He's such a lovable goof, much like Little Abner is.
I think...
But I was trying to figure out how it works.
It's just the quality of the writing.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, the quality of the writer, I should say.
Yeah.
I think that Al Cap and Segar are just on a different level to Khalid.
Yes. Sure. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there were some others like incinerate. Whenever he wants to say insinuate, he says incinerate. Are you trying to incinerate?
What are you trying to incinerate?
Yeah. And there's a great sequence where Castor hires a tutor for him he decides to try to educate him. And those strips are hilarious.
Yeah.
And there's one where he decides to try to write a will, and Castor tries to help him with it, and those are hilarious. Anytime he's trying to... Because I'm trying to figure out what the nature of his character is. It's like he doesn't think he doesn't fit into society. He believes he's a part of society, and he's functioning normally in it. And it's everybody else that can see that he's some kind of weird sailor that's not like them, that says things weird. There's one time he gets a boxing coach. It's a hilarious sequence where this guy sounds like Burgess Meredith in Rocky. He's like, duh, you gotta go to the ring and do this. And then Papa's like, I don't trust that guy, any guy who says duh or damn or something like that. It was really great. So much great stuff. He really just once the wheels were spinning, Segar just really figured it out, I think. And
I think it's worth pointing out that Segar doesn't have to make a choice between a funny strip and a continuity strip.
yeah.
They're all continuity strips.
That's
and
right.
they're all funny.
Yeah, that's right. Because there's no, as I said before, there's no punchlines. There's almost never a punchline at the end in the sixth panel. The jokes are in the middle, where Popeye's being weird and Castor's like exasperated by him all the time. That kind of thing.
Yeah, there's almost always a gag.
Yes.
And yet they're part of the story too.
Yeah.
It's part of this flowing narrative.
Yeah.
Again, I keep going back to Harold Teen, like you observed last week. Harold Teen, sometimes there were plainly strips that he was writing to advance the story, and plainly strips that were supposed to have a setup and payoff gag, and neither of them worked very well.
Yeah.
It was kind of a shambles.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, is there anything else we need to say about the Popeye comics?
No, I think we've covered it.
Yeah, I think
covered that you love these comics.
I do love these comics, and I think the key thing is that they're not like the cartoons.
Okay.
That's a really...
Right, we haven't talked much about the cartoons, but I think most people of our generation would know the cartoons and not the comics.
Yes. And I think there's...
Where he's tangles with Bluto. Bluto is the main antagonist. He eats spinach every
episode, yeah.
Like Roger Ramjet taking a proton pill. He eats the spinach to power up, and then he thrashes Bluto and wins olive oil end episode.
Yes.
And talks funny.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a great sequence in the Sundays where he's supposed to have a prize fight, but he gets thrown in jail, and then he escapes from jail.
Pretends to be his own twin
he has to keep running back into the jail. He's hung up a curtain like a tapestry over the hole in the wall so he can run back, and he pretends to be his own twin brother. It was crazy.
Yeah. Why is that? They ask. I think he punches his way out of jail.
Yes.
And he hangs that drape. And they say, "Well, what's that doing there?" He goes, "I'm accustomed to hanging a curtain."
Yeah. There's also a great sequence in that where while he's escaped, another cop tries to arrest him for something. And he's running away. And I gotta get back to jail. Oh, so good. Okay, so 1980, Robert Altman. Off the success of MASH, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, The Long Goodbye, Nashville, Three Women, suddenly this monumental director, I don't know if we've had one of this stature so far on the podcast, comes in.
Good.
Like we haven't had a Scorsese. That's one of the name I almost used. We haven't had someone like that. Ooh, there's no Kubricks on here so far. We've got Robert
We've got a
Altman.
genuine auteur.
Yes.
I mean, we've had Tim Burton.
Yes.
Straight, and I'm drawing a blank.
Yeah. I can't
There
think of one.
probably are. There's some other directors, I suppose, but this is a genuine auteur, a man who's associated with the golden age of cinema in the 1970s.
Yeah, absolutely. Because
the new Hollywood, this is the great decade of American cinema.
Yes.
And he's right in it.
Yep.
And to cap it off, in 1979, he starts directing Popeye.
Well,
which comes out in
okay, I know you have some more details about the production of this, but I want to go into my speculation first.
All right, great.
So
I want to hear it. Yeah.
Okay, so Shelley Duvall is Olive Oil, of course. The most perfect casting, maybe in the history of cinema.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
She's been in, at this stage, I think this is her 9th movie. The Shining also comes out in the same year. She's been in 9 movies. 7 of them have been Robert Altman movies.
Yes.
So, okay, and we also get a writer on this movie, Jules Feiffer, who's a legendary cartoonist.
Yes.
So this is a guy, but he also transitioned into playwriting and screenwriting, and he wrote
Carnal
Knowledge.
Yes.
Great movie. He also wrote a famous comic called Sick, Sick, Sick in the 60s, which was on everybody's shelves back then.
Yes.
So this is a guy that I'm sure had read those E.C. Segar comics.
He absolutely did.
I'm sure he wasn't looking at that cartoon solely. I'm sure he was very aware of the comics.
All right, so, okay, I'll jump in.
But, okay, my one bit of speculation I want to get to first is, why is Robert Altman directing this movie? And I'm like, okay, did they ask Shelley Duvall and then she called her pal Robert Altman? Or did Robert Altman work with her so much and was like, you look just like Olive Oil, I want to make a Popeye movie, and I'm going to cast you in it.
All right.
Okay, what can you tell me?
All right, okay. I think, let's talk about how the film got made.
Okay.
So I might as well just launch into the story.
Yeah.
I read all of this in a book called Fiasco, A History of Hollywood's Iconic Flops.
Okay.
Published in 2006 that devotes an entire chapter to Popeye. All right, so Popeye's story of Popeye the film begins in 1977 with Annie.
Okay.
another comic book, in this case made Broadway musical.
Yes.
So in 1977, Annie had just finished its first run on Broadway, which was extremely successful. 2,377 performances. And the producer, Robert Evans...
Okay, legendary director.
Producer.
Producer of The Godfather, Chinatown, Love Story.
Yes.
What else? Rosemary's Baby.
Yes, Rosemary's Baby. Yeah. Well done. Okay. Correct. Yes. Famous producer and cocaine addict. He's working he's at Paramount. He sees the play, the show, and he wants it.
Okay.
Right. But there are other people that want it as well, including Columbia Pictures. There's a bidding war.
Okay.
$10 million eventually is paid for the rights for Annie. Columbia Pictures wins. Undeterred, Robert Evans starts to think, well, what else have I got? What else can I do? And he remembered that Paramount owns the rights to Popeye.
Okay.
He sort of comes to it naturally. Another cartoon that could be made into a musical like Annie.
Yep.
And this is why the film is a musical. It's directly inspired by Annie.
But
although Annie comes out after.
Yes.
But it goes into production first.
Okay.
There's also some scuttlebutt that Superman might also have been an inspiration as well. So
I actually do think Superman is an important touchstone that, like Batman 89, is going to spawn a lot of stuff coming out. Yeah.
So when this was occurring, Superman was in production.
Yeah.
People knew it was around. Certainly, it seems like Robin Williams, who plays Popeye in the film, was thought that since Superman is getting made, Popeye could be his Superman.
Okay.
Essentially.
He was a roommate of Christopher Reeve.
He was indeed.
Yeah.
At Juilliard.
Yes. Yeah. And was Kevin Conroy as well? When those three living together, I think at some stage?
I only remember Christopher Reeve and Robin Williams.
All right, anyway.
In fact, I've got a quote. This is the quote that begins the chapter. This is from Robin Williams. When I was training for Popeye, for the role, I thought, this is it. This is my Superman. And it's going to go through the fucking roof. I also had the dream of getting up and thanking the Academy. But I got beyond the this is it stage as soon as we started shooting. After the first day of Popeye, I thought, well, maybe this isn't it. And I finally wound up going, oh god, when is this going to be over? This film, not a spoiler, it had a famously troubled production.
Yeah. It's weird though, because I felt like he was having fun in the movie. Watching him on screen, he looks like he's having a good time. Filling that role. I don't know if that's really true or not, because it sounds like every line of dialogue is 80 yard.
Yes, it is. That's right. Yes, that's correct. He had a lot of trouble with the pipe.
Yeah.
And the mumbling.
Yeah.
And I hate to burst your bubble, but he did not have a good time making the film.
As soon as I knew it, I had a hunch you were going to show up here tonight and tell me that he didn't.
Unfortunately, he did not. And it's because Altman wouldn't let him ad-lib.
Oh.
Can you imagine not letting Robin Williams ad-lib?
Okay, yeah.
He wouldn't let him ad-lib.
Right.
Instead, he encouraged him to physically ad-lib, in the sense that he encouraged him to try and channel that energy into movement.
Yeah, okay.
So, could you imagine casting Robin Williams? Well, this is Robin Williams' first film role, essentially, or at least first leading role.
Yes.
So I guess they didn't...
I looked it's his second movie. I think his first movie wasn't his lead, but even after this, got World According to Garp 82, Moscow on the Hudson 84, Good Morning Vietnam 87, Dead Poets Society 89. So he only makes 5 movies in the next 9 years, and they're not really comedies. They're all serious roles. Yeah. Where he's a funny guy in them, if you know what I mean.
Good Morning Vietnam is what really kind of makes him an A-lister, as it were.
But the stand-up, all that stuff was still happening. Like the stand-up comedy and those
albums. You
couldn't
stop him from doing stand-up. In fact, this is an effective segue. He just did it constantly.
Right.
I read an interview with, one moment, Paul Dooley, who played Wimpy.
Yes.
Who was also in Deep Space Nine.
He was also in 16 Candles and Bob and Doug McKenzie's Strange Brew.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, he was in Strange Brew.
Yeah. he was the manager of the he was like a good guy, but he was under the Max von Sydow character.
Right. Yeah. But we're most interested in Star Trek references on this program.
Yes.
He played Enabran Tain, the head of the Obsidian Order.
Oh, I didn't realize that was him. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
He said that one of the things that made the shoot bearable was that Robin Williams, they were never bored with Robin Williams. Right. He would just gig constantly, always trying to make them laugh, always doing... this was a closed shoot. It was shot in Malta.
Yes.
In a bay
Yeah.
where they built the entire town of Sweetwater.
It's still there.
It is still there. It's a tourist attraction.
Yeah.
Quite a popular one.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can get married there.
Yeah. I will go there someday, I think.
And...
Can I just interrupt about the ad-libbing thing for a second?
Yes.
The scene where they first meet Sweet Pea, it seems like he's ad-libbing. It seems like he's responding to this baby's actions and gurgling, but I don't know, maybe it's...
there might have been some. I couldn't say for sure. I only read the one book.
Yeah, sure.
But it seems like he found this really constrictive, role to be really... And it turned him off the idea of ever directing.
Okay.
For example, because he just saw how difficult it is to manage different people's expectations.
Yeah.
And the different restrictions on creativity that would occur if you're in charge. Although he, of course, expressed it in a typically Robin Williams way. He said, "It would be very difficult for me to say to someone, 'I'm sorry, that wasn't very good as a director,' and then have them go, 'Well, what about Popeye?'"
Right.
So he got cabin fever a bit. So essentially, Altman liked having people all in one spot away from the studios. He's not a studio guy. Very much an auteur.
Yeah.
Very independent. He liked the idea of having all of his crew and cast in one spot, isolated from everyone else, where he could sort of just keep an eye on them almost.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. They built kind of like accommodation along with the town to enormous expense.
Yeah.
And they all just lived there. And Robin Williams especially went stir crazy and apparently would leave the set of a night to find bars.
Okay.
The book I read used the words "scoured the island" for bars so that he could perform stand-up to the drunken patrons of these bars in Malta.
I think this is a fully realized world. Like, I think this Hamlet, Sweet Haven, is a real... He's built an entire place. Like, it really feels like you're in a place. So,
well, I
think the work he put into that, everything you've just described, it testifies to that.
These aren't fronts.
No.
It's still there.
Yeah.
These were built to last. They're three-dimensional buildings.
Yeah.
With interiors and exteriors all painted, enormous expense. Malta doesn't have a lot of wood on it. This all had to be imported.
Right.
Apparently, from Austria or maybe Holland.
Yeah.
I read both.
Yeah.
They imported the roof shingles, hand-split roofing shingles from British Columbia.
Okay.
This film cost a lot of money. In late 1970 dollars, this cost $20 million to make.
Yeah.
Which was, I think movies usually cost less than $10 million at this time.
Right.
US. So this was a big expenditure. But how does it get made? I got distracted. Okay. Shall we return to the narrative?
Yeah.
Robert Evans, the producer, is friends with Dustin Hoffman.
Okay.
Dustin Hoffman is keen to play Popeye.
Okay.
This helps get the film greenlit because he's a big star.
Yeah.
He starts training to get into the role. He starts taking dance lessons, voice lessons.
Okay.
Dustin Hoffman's serious about it.
Yeah.
He's approaching it with his usual...
And he's a method actor.
Oh, yeah. He's approaching it very seriously. Yeah. He'd appeared in another Evans film, Marathon Man.
Yes.
And they were friends.
Okay, well, okay. That's interesting, because he did famously starve himself for 3 days for the torture scene.
Yeah. He stayed up 3 days without sleeping.
Yes.
And his co-star...
Laurence Olivier.
Apparently asked him if he ever tried acting.
Yeah. Classic British actor reaction, yeah.
And yes, so then they needed the scriptwriter, and they asked, as you pointed out, Jules Feiffer, who is a famous cartoonist and also a respected playwright and burgeoning scriptwriter. He accepted on the condition that the film be true to the strips.
Okay, interesting.
And not the animation.
Well, that's very interesting given the opening 5 seconds of this movie, which is the cartoon.
Well, that's all. Yeah,
and even the name,
really
the Fleischer brothers' name is at the beginning of it as well.
Yes, that's true. But E.C. Segar was a hero of Pfeiffer's, apparently, and he said he would only do it if he could base it more on the strips than on the animation.
Okay. Well,
which I think is pretty much... I mean, that sequence at the beginning is 30 seconds.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that's true.
As then Robert Altman... Dustin Hoffman leaves the production.
Okay.
Because of conflict with Pfeiffer.
Okay.
They clash.
Okay.
And Hoffman says to Evans, it's either him or me.
Okay.
And strangely, I mean, Dustin Hoffman or the screenwriter?
That's...
Strangely, Evans chooses Pfeiffer and Hoffman leaves the production.
I wonder if Hoffman would have been expensive, more expensive than a TV star like Robin Williams.
Well,
no name. So that might have affected the decision.
Allegedly, when trying to calm the executives at Paramount, Evans said, "We've got a hit. We don't need Hoffman.
Right.
Anyone could play this role.
Okay.
Even that guy that was on the cover of Newsweek the other day.
Okay.
The Mork.
Right.
This might be dramatic license.
Yeah.
But yes, that's how Robin Williams becomes involved.
Okay.
Who also begins preparing for the role. Loses weight, takes boxing lessons, takes tap lessons.
Okay.
Yeah, and gets in serious shape for the role, apparently.
Huh, okay. Interesting.
Then, the director.
Okay.
So, Evans approaches Altman.
Okay.
He wants Altman.
Okay.
Why? Again, there seems to be, like with Hoffman, there's a personal connection.
Okay.
They seem to have known one another.
Okay.
Evans suggested a doctor to help Robert Altman with back pain.
Ah.
But there's another idea, which is that Evans fancied himself as having a magic touch.
Okay.
And he believed that he could take a director, a famous director, a big name director, but who had been struggling a bit, and sort of inspire him to greatness.
Okay.
He'd done that with Francis Ford Coppola.
Yeah, and Polanski, I would say, with Chinatown.
Right.
Oh, no, because Rosemary's Baby.
No, the Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah,
was
okay. So
but,
it's not quite true in that case, yeah.
So that might be. So Altman had these great films,
Okay.
but some of them weren't hits.
Right.
Like McCabe and Mrs. Miller.
Yeah.
It didn't make a lot of money.
Right,
Nowadays
okay.
it's considered a classic.
Okay.
But at the time didn't make a lot of money, and he'd made a bunch. And because he wouldn't work with studios, and he hated the studio system, and he would make small, low budget films, and they wouldn't turn out very good. He made like 4 in a row, which you've never heard of and I've never heard of.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at this point, this is when Evans pounces and says,
Okay.
"Make this film."
Okay.
Yeah. And Altman, in turn, Altman has, as I said, he has his people that he likes to work with, most particularly Shelley Duvall, with whom he'd made 7 movies.
Yeah.
And so he cast her. They wanted, apparently when Dustin Hoffman was still involved, they wanted Lily Tomlin to maybe play Olive Oil.
Okay.
But, and then, I think someone from Saturday Night Live.
Oh, Gilda Radner?
Gilda Radner.
Okay.
But, but it's...
I'm saying okay to these things, but the reality is when you see Shelley Duvall as Olive Oil...
Brilliant.
She's so great.
She's brilliant. She told Paul Dooley that her nickname in high school was Olive Oil. She's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's perfect casting.
Yeah.
Absolutely perfect. So, but it was Altman that wanted her.
Yeah. And it's not even... I mean, this is jumping way ahead, but the songs are... There's 5 or 6 songs. Most of them are whatever. But whenever she sings on a song, it's really special, I feel. And...
I'm glad you feel that way.
It's really interesting. She has the face, the body. She's worked on the walk and the kind of hunch and everything.
She's got those big shoes too.
Yeah, she really
Very
inhabits
funny.
the role so completely.
Perfect. Much better than Robin Williams, really.
I think Robin Williams is really great in it. I think he's got the voice. I think this is not just whatever Jules Feiffer felt about it. This is not the E.C. Segar version of Popeye, in a sense, because this is not a guy who's constantly out looking for fights.
No, he tries to
get out of fights.
Yeah.
He's trying to avoid it. He's not the first one to jump in the ring. He tries to talk Pluto down. That wouldn't happen in the comics. Now, the comic strip character is not someone you could translate into, maybe into a 5-minute cartoon, into a 2-hour movie. It seems like a strange choice. To even attempt that. But they've done it, and in order to make that a movie character, he has to try to talk his way out of fights. So it's the only way he can sustain a narrative with his character. He can't just start punching every single person he sees.
Well, we know how the film got made now.
Yeah.
So then once Altman's on board, Malta is chosen as the site for Sweet Haven. Takes 165 workers, 4 months to build.
Okay.
And as I said, this place was built to last.
Yeah.
It's a very expensive undertaking.
Yeah.
And then they spend 6 months shooting there.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah. It's supposed to be a 4-month shoot. It goes 2 months over.
Okay.
Mostly because of rainy weather.
Yes, I would have predicted that, yeah.
But also partly because of problems with the prosthetic arms.
I was wondering about those arms because they actually looked pretty good. And I was like, boy, 1980 must have been hard work getting those to stay on and look right all the time.
It absolutely did. The original ones looked terrible.
Okay.
They had to get some new ones made in Italy at great expense.
Okay.
Took several weeks.
Okay.
During which Altman could only shoot Robin Williams when you couldn't see his arms.
Okay. Okay.
So like the scene at the start where he's wearing his raincoat, anything above the shoulders, things like that. When the things were made, they look great, but they're so tight that they cut off Robin Williams' circulation, and he can't wear them for longer than... Well, it didn't say exactly how long he could wear them, but his arms would go numb.
I wonder how long it took to put them on, because nowadays, like, to make a Klingon or something, you're talking about 4 to 6 hours in the chair. So I wonder how long the arms took.
I'm sure it took time to get them on.
Yeah.
And get them off.
Yeah.
And he had to be doing it constantly.
Yeah.
Because his arms would go numb.
Yeah.
And then he couldn't move his arms.
Yeah.
Yeah. he couldn't move his hands or his fingers. They'd have to take them off and let the blood supply resume. Apparently, really unbearable.
Yeah.
Robin Williams apparently called the set Stalag Altman.
Right. Okay, shall we get into the plot of it?
Yes.
Okay, so in this case, we don't have Castor hiring a sailor to take him and his magic wiffle hand out to a gambling island.
No.
We start in an island called Sweet Haven, which I mentioned.
They
have their own
dirge-like song.
national anthem, which is a bit dull. But the sailor shows up, Popeye, and he's shown up because he's looking for his pappy.
Yep.
He just has a feeling that he might be in this town. He had a vision of maybe his mother came to him one night and said his pappy was still alive.
Yes.
And he's maybe even going from port to port. I don't know, but he's shown up at this one.
That's what he's been doing.
He feels like his dad's at this one.
He almost died of exposure.
Yeah.
In Macau or somewhere in the Orient. And he had a vision of his mother who told him that his pappy was still alive.
So he shows up in this town in a rowboat. He goes up and rents a room. He says, "You got a room for Rink?" And the girl's like, "What?" The woman's, "What?" And he says, "A room for Rink, for Rink." And he says, I saw the sign up. And oh, the room for rent. Oh, my stars and gardens, she says. I love that bit. So this room where he decides to stay while he's in town is owned by the Oil family.
Yes.
So he meets Olive Oil there. It's the night before her engagement party to Bluto, who is like the town magnate. Like, he runs the whole show, it seems like.
They call him Captain Bluto.
Captain Bluto, and these people are constantly paying taxes that are going him.
Yeah. Everyone's being bled dry by all of these different taxes. The taxman rides around on a trike.
Yeah.
And there are taxes for all kinds of ridiculous things.
Yes.
Taxes for asking questions, taxes for tying up your boat, taxes for not tying up your boat, taxes for coming ashore, taxes for looking in a certain direction, and so on. Yeah. It's not that funny, but, there it is.
Yeah, but it works, it figures into the plot, actually, even if it's not funny.
And, the taxes are all being paid to the mysterious Commodore.
Yes.
Of whom Bluto is just a representative. Now, a short digression. Who played Bluto, Kumar?
It was Paul Smith, yes! Yeah, Paul Smith, that was the Dune Bell. Yeah, Paul Smith,
The Beast Raban!
Yes. And he is also... So this is a few years before Dune, of course, 4 years before, but he had a long career before this. And he was also...
Playing heavies, mostly.
Heavies. And he's in a movie in 1982, 2 years after, it's called Pieces, an Italian slasher movie, which I highly recommend for craziness. And apparently he's also in Red Sonja, which is a borderline comic book
which we may get to one day.
We may cover that, yeah.
If this podcast is still going in 10 years or so, we may well get to it.
Yeah.
Speaking of Dune...
Yes.
Mrs. Oxheart?
Yes, Linda Hunt.
Played by Linda Hunt, who is the Shout-Out Mapes.
It's her first feature film. She was a stage actress before this.
This was her first feature film?
First feature film.
I didn't know that.
I don't know if she did any TV before this or not, but certainly this was her first movie. And there's all sorts of...
I think she's an Oscar-winning actor.
Yes.
She won for the Year of Living Dangerously.
That's right.
She plays a man.
Which is a year after this, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's all sorts of kooky characters in the town. There's a guy who's constantly trying to catch his hat and having, like... This is in the opening scene when you see the town, and he's, like, trying to chase his hat, and he's kicking it and stumbling over it. It's a bit like a vaudeville routine, but also... I started to realize very comic booky, and there's a lot of stuff that Altman's trying to do to make people walk and physically act like they're in a cartoon.
Yes.
And especially the fight when Popeye finally fights Bluto, there's a scene where he turns into a hula hoop kind of thing and rolls down the hill, and then he gets pounded on the head and he drills down.
Yes.
That kind of stuff. There's a few moments like that. The prize fight that comes up later, there's a lot of that kind of stuff. So you can see what he's doing right off the bat with all of the characters in this town. Ham Gravy is in there. Maybe he's even the guy trying to chase his hat. He's the most cartoonish guy in it. Her brother, Castor, isn't anything like Castor in the comics. He's not this guy that's trying to scheme not scheme, but he's always planning, or he's working on making money or whatever, and how's he going to invest his money, that kind of stuff. He's kind of the smart guy. He's not like that at all. And the mom is a bit like the mom in the comics, but Olive's dad is not like Olive Oil's dad. In this, he's just saying you should apologize to me for whatever it is.
Running gag.
It's a running gag that he says over and over. You should apologize.
Not a very funny gag.
Not that great. It's not like in the comics where he's the one that's always agreeing that Popeye should marry her every time you see the guy, or something like that. So Paul Dooley, we mentioned, is Wimpy, who is
fantastic.
He's really great.
Perfectly cast. He looks just like Wimpy.
Yeah, and he delivers Wimpy's lines about "I'll pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today.
Pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today." And that's pretty much the only refrain I can remember from the entire insipid soundtrack to this movie.
And he's always trying to scam hamburgers.
Yep. He even sells Sweet Pea for a hamburger. After it's been established that Sweet Pea can make infinite money.
Yes. Yeah. So as we mentioned, Paul Smith turns up as Bluto on the night of the engagement party. He has that same "I hate you" squint in every movie.
Yeah, this is the same one that Raban does.
Yes, Raban, and in Pieces he uses that "I hate you" squint.
And the film spends an inordinate amount of time listening to his breathing.
Yes.
He's always going...
Yes, the growl, yeah. Again, probably ADR'd is my guess.
Yeah.
There is a Rough House Cafe here in this little town. There's lots of... And Popeye goes there, he reveals to Wimpy that he's shown up looking for his father. A bunch of guys are laughing at him. This is where we get the first fist fight. Popeye beats up all these guys.
Yeah.
It's pretty wacky. There's a funny scene where they start shutting the place down. Like, as soon as the staff know that something's going wrong, they start, like, putting down cages and stuff and jumping out of the way.
You're right, they do, but it's so odd, the way it's directed. Because you've hit on it when you said he's tried to direct it like a comic. Yeah. He's tried to bring a comic kind of sensibility to it. And it's so odd because the film is so sluggish and staid and kind of, like, dark a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. It's not like the Little Abner film we watched last year, which was colourful and pretty much made to look like a stage, like a musical. Instead, he's gone for a deliberate aesthetic and a deliberate kind of, but it's so colourless and drab, and everyone feels like they're moving very slowly, and then there will be a burst of activity, a kind of burst of wackiness, where something comic-like would happen. And then it'll snap back to the same kind of slow-paced interaction, dialogue, kind of very static camera. And then there'll be, again, a burst. Someone will do a wacky thing in the background. Like you said, throw themselves over a counter. I found it really jarring to watch. Really, unlike anything I've ever seen.
Right.
I don't think it works.
I don't know. I think... There's a couple of things going on here, which is that Altman's thing, his forte, is directing scenes with like 15 people in them. So I think what's happening is that when you've got a lot of people interacting at once, that's kind of the activity. Like there's a dinner scene where Popeye has come to the house and he eats dinner with the family downstairs, and there's 7 conversations happening at the same time.
That's a good scene.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm thinking specifically of the Rough House Cafe.
Yeah.
And there isn't a blur of activity going on. It's not a frenetic activity involving every person. Instead, everyone will be sort of standing around, and then the camera will snap to someone doing a thing, and then it'll cut away from them, and we'll return.
I think, you know what, but I think the comparison is the House of Ill Repute, where you might catch a venerable disease. Is kind of similar. There's a lot of people hanging around, but I don't feel like that one's
more normal, I think.
Yeah.
People that's a more normal scene. But that Rough House Cafe feels very odd. As you say, I think he's going for some sort of stylistic thing there. But it didn't work for me, but there are plenty of people that like this film. It's considered something of a cult classic.
There's lots of... So the thing about this fight was... This is when I started noticing the cartoon sound effects as well in the soundtrack. There's some like boing sounds, that kind of thing is happening once in a while. Oh, even earlier when... I don't know. I kept thinking, am I crazy for liking this movie? There's a scene early on, as soon as Popeye shows up at the hotel or at the inn where he's staying, Olive shows him up to his room, and there's some Pratt files where like stuff falls off the wall and she falls on the bed and it smashes and there's like a cartoon sound effect. But I actually kept laughing at how ridiculous it was, or not. I mean, at the intentional ridiculousness of it. But yeah, there's some cartoony. This stuff is the point I'm trying to get at. This stuff is cartoony. It's not comic strip. It's not like it came from the EC Secret Comics. It seems like it came out of the Fleischer cartoons. This kind of stuff.
That's very likely. I think the book I read said that Altman would tried to direct them to move, quote, like cartoons.
You know what it reminded me of? I kept thinking of Batman and Robin, directed by Joel Schumacher, where reportedly he would yell at the actors, You're
a cartoon.
You're a cartoon. You're in a comic
You're in a comic book.
You're in a comic book. All the time to make sure they hammed it up.
Yeah. What a bizarre thing to yell.
It felt like something like that. But I loved it when she fell in the bed and the bed smashed, and then he got trapped in the room and the doorknob came off and all that kind of stuff.
So this is supposed to be a musical, and there's no dance numbers or anything like that.
Okay,
everything's shot very close.
I wanted to talk about this too, because when you're talking about Annie, I was like, this isn't adding up, because these songs are little hamlet songs. They're little village hillside songs.
Yeah.
There's no big orchestration or anything. That number, I can't remember, we get the national anthem in the first scene, but
Sweetwater song.
When she's getting dressed for the engagement party and her friends, he's large. I love this. I don't love this song. I love her delivery of it. I think it's so funny. And she's meanwhile secretly packing 2 suitcases to run away, where she's talking about how much she loves this guy. Now, lyrics are actually funny. And there's actually a song in the Rough House 2 where there's a song about meat and food. Everything is food. And the song is drab, but the lyrics are weird and interesting. Like, we're talking about meat and the meat on your feet.
It's really weird.
It's weird, and I thought, okay, I'm here for it, but the music, sure, the song is drab, but I think that the other thing was the instrumentation of all of it was it was like the town itself. These weren't big production numbers. You're not here for that. I think you're here to laugh at these strange songs. Like he's large and he's rich.
And he needs me.
And the He Needs Me song.
Yeah, I can get on board with what you're saying, but it didn't work for me. Like the songs, as you say, they're so dull.
No, the other songs didn't work for me. Only when she was singing.
Only when Olive was singing. But yeah, right. But even when Olive Oil was singing...
And they have a duet that I quite like when Olive and Popeye have that duet about sailing the seas. It's a bit of a romance song where they're trying to avoid revealing their feelings to each other.
It's such a strange choice, though. To make as you say, like, if Annie is the inspiration for this, and then you make a musical where the numbers are all very simple...
Yes. But the thing is, they would be out of place if they were big production orchestra numbers. It wouldn't fit with... And I think they don't fit in the Little Abner movie we watched either, which is supposed to be about a hillbilly town.
No, that didn't work, but because they just tried to film the musical, essentially. Yeah. But it had those classical musical things, like a big kind of dance number in the middle, which was the Sadie Hawkins race. There's nothing like that in this. Everything's shot in rooms, or the boxing ring. No one has room to dance.
No.
I've seen it described as an anti-musical.
Yeah, it kind of is. Yeah.
So it makes me wonder if, as an auteur, he's deliberately trying to kind of subvert musical tropes almost.
I think so. I think he knows that people are there for the lyrics of the songs, not the melodies or instrumentation of them, is my feeling. I think he knows he can't break out of that room and have a big song and dance across a field or something. It just wouldn't fit with the overall
what he's going for, which is just this really dull, like almost nightmarish kind of town.
Yeah. So she runs away from the engagement party.
Yes.
And Popeye's just hanging out at the docks. He tried to insert himself into the party and just was
Everyone's really mean to him.
Yeah.
In that first half hour.
Yeah. In fact, they were like, "There's a stranger in town," and they're all
missing from this. Maybe there were cuts or something, but something is really missing.
I don't know. I think right from the opening scene, it's like as soon as they see a stranger pull up to the dock, it's like, "Whoa, we don't have outsiders in this town." I think that's the establishment of it. So anyway, he leaves and just hanging out on the pier. He bumps into her as she's trying to run away. She doesn't really know what she wants to do or where she wants to go to. And then a baby gets slipped into gets swapped for one of the baskets she's carrying, and Sweet Pea is in it.
Yes.
And this is the cutest baby in movies, maybe. Very cute baby.
This is Robert Altman's grand son.
Ah, okay.
Speaking of casting people he knows,
Yeah, right.
his own grandson.
So there's a note on the baby, please take care of this baby until I can...
Get my life together. 25 years to do it.
So they decide they've got to keep this baby. They go back to the house. Bluto sees her and Popeye with this baby and blows a fuse. There's a funny shot where everything literally goes red.
They're dressed in red.
And he's got literal steam coming out of his ears.
It's funny.
Little moment there. So now the engagement's off, basically. And then suddenly we get the announcement there's a prize fight that's coming to town.
Well, first of all, Bluto, the oil family haven't been paying tax.
That's right.
They haven't been paying their fair share of the extortionate taxes because Bluto is engaged to Olive Oil.
Yeah.
But with the breaking off of the engagement, they're now being bled white.
Yes, so the house is, everything is in the house is repossessed. And even though it seems like some of the walls and stuff are gone too, they're like completely exposed in there now, yeah. So this prize fight comes to town, and Castor's like, oh, he thinks aloud, like in Dune. He's like, we can hear a voiceover.
It's the only moment in the film,
Only moment in the moment. He's like, oh, if I won that money, it could save our family.
ADR again, probably.
Yeah. So Castor decides to get in this fight, and the fighter... So the ring comes in on a boat, and it turns out that the fighter is the
dirtiest fighter in the world.
Yep. And he's the son of the Linda Hunt character.
Yes.
So,
Mrs. Oxheart.
She already lives in town, so where was he on this boat that floated into town?
Yeah, she was already there. Doesn't make sense.
So this mean fighter beats up Castor and kicks him, and he goes flying in this very cartoon. There's actually one of the Sundays where Popeye goes sailing over the audience. He gets punched out of the ring. It's really a genius moment in cartooning. I don't know if it had ever been done before, where it's almost like the same crowd, and it's 4 panels where he's like going over them.
Incidentally, the guy that played the dirty boxer, Oxblood Oxheart, his name is Peter Bray.
Okay.
As far as I can tell, he has almost no other screen credits, and he primarily worked as a producer. Produced a lot of
weird
stuff. I guess, they needed a big dude and...
Right, okay. Get Peter in here.
Get Peter! And he is big. Yeah. He's a huge guy.
He's a very big guy.
He's even bigger than Raban.
Yeah.
Than Bluto, yeah.
Yeah, so the prize fight...
He's not called upon to do any acting, really.
No, so Castor gets pummeled and literally sent sailing through the air. Popeye gets in the ring, beats this guy up, wins the money, but then they find out the next day that Sweet Pea had predicted the fight and what would happen based on, like, whistling noises he would make.
So like Jeep the Wonder Dog.
Yeah. So Wimpy figures this out, and he's like, oh, I got a scam. I'll take the baby for a walk, and he'll go to the races, the horse races, which is actually like a fun fair, like toy horses thing that he's racing on, which is attached to a brothel, it seems like.
Yes. It's inside the brothel.
It's inside the brothel. They figured this out.
House of Ill Repute.
Yeah, the rest of the family figures this out. Castor is down there already. I think he's just hanging out in the brothel.
He was.
There's a funny line where he says something like, if my mom knew I was here, and then he looks up and he says, she's here. So
she's here, yeah.
Yeah.
That was funny.
Yeah.
Might be the only time I laughed.
So they come in. So the family comes down. They rebuke Wimpy for bringing a baby down here and gambling, which they consider all. And Popeye especially, Popeye especially offended. But then when Olive hears that he's winning this money and how much money, and he's like, well, she's like, we got to save the family. Let's keep doing it. And Popeye sings a song about how offended he is and who he is as a person, which is in the comic he would have said how honest he was and then would have told a lie. Is that how that character works in the
nothing
comic?
Like that. Instead, we get a long song about how he's Popeye.
Yes, and I am what I am is a thing he says in the comics that came out of the comics, that line. So then Sweet Pea is kidnapped by Wimpy, who delivers her, because Bluto finds out about this business and kidnaps her and delivers her to the Commodore, who is Poop Deck Pappy.
Yep.
With the same bulgy forearms. Played by Ray Walston.
We got the same bulgy arms. He's great, actually. I think he's a better really Popeye than Robin Williams, frankly.
Yes.
I think
I know what you mean.
I think I'd have watched the
He's a legendary actor. Like
he's really good.
He's really good in the role. Although, I mean, there's a lot of comedy on the boat. Once they chase Bluto, So Popeye comes down there to rescue Sweet Pea from the kidnappers, but Bluto's taken off with Sweet Pea, and there's supposedly a hidden treasure. Pappy has a hidden treasure somewhere.
That's why Bluto's been working for him, because he wants that buried treasure.
He wants that treasure. So Popeye rescues his dad, tries to convince him that he's his son.
And he won't believe him.
He won't believe him, but they get on his boat and they chase after Bluto's boat. It's a very long sequence. There's probably 20 minutes left in the movie. There's
really long.
And there's a lot of lines which from Ray
Pappy has
Walston,
this long rant about children.
Yeah, I wasn't enjoying these lines. They weren't very funny in this section. Finally,
we're on the same page at last.
Catch up. There's he launches a cannonball at Bluto's boat. Oh, Olive Oil gets trapped in, I don't know what you call those things on boats.
It's like a funnel or something.
Yeah, something like that. She gets trapped in that for a pretty long period of time.
Help! Oh!
Yeah.
Help!
There's an octopus down there, which is starting to come alive and attack Sweet Pea, who's alone in a boat.
That octopus, incidentally, was supposed to work. It was supposed to be an animatronic octopus to move. They had trouble with it.
Yeah.
Much like they had trouble with a lot of stuff on this.
I believe it.
And
I immediately thought of the octopus in Bride of the Monster. Yeah, Bride of the Monster, the Ed Wood movie where it just wouldn't work.
Yes, and they're just...
Yeah, Bela Lugosi was like pulling the arms over himself.
That's exactly what...
I did kind of work sometimes, but...
That's pretty much what... well, it just blinks. That's pretty much all it does.
I did
the rest of it's just actors interacting with the tentacles.
Yes, right. So I did like when Popeye is about to get on the boat to go, and the town is cheering him on. The kids say, "Kick him in the butt." And I was like, "That's a bit of E.C. Segar in there, with the kids cheering him on." So we get this boat chase. The music in the background is really lame too. There's a sword fight, which is very, very like the comic strips, because they're having a sword fight. Even after they fall in the water, they're still fighting with swords like they're above the water. There's a moment where Bluto dives in, and it's a very cartoony dive where he's like,
he does that knees, diving shape.
Yeah, diving shape. Like a dog or something.
With his praying hands right up under his chin and his body curved over.
Yeah. So they did... Oh, and there's a scene where Popeye... How he ends up in the water, he tries to stab Bluto and just goes sailing past him and then falls straight in the water with the sword still outstretched. And then they fight, and then finally Pappy throws a can of spinach to Popeye.
Hits him on the head.
He says, "You gotta eat that." And Popeye's like, "I hate spinach, I'll never eat it." And Bluto's like, "Oh, you hate spinach?" And then he forces it down his throat. And suddenly we get the Fleischer Popeye music. Da-na-na-na-na-na.
Yeah.
And then he beats up Bluto. Oh, he beats up the octopus. Actually, I did laugh at the moment where you see the octopus flying. You see a burst of water, and then the octopus flying through the sky.
And then Bluto swims away, have all of his clothing having turned yellow.
Yes. Because he's yellow.
Yeah.
And then we sing the Popeye song, the Popeye theme song, the Fleischer song.
Which is the best song in the movie by miles.
No, He's Large is the best song in the movie.
We'll just have to...
And then second place is He Needs Me. And then the third place is the duet. And then fourth place is the Popeye song, because they added like verses to it. Like, just give us a line of it. I don't need the whole song. It's almost like they felt obligated to put the song in there. It doesn't need to be in there at all.
I think they did feel obligated.
It's like, oh, people know this song. Much like they put the cartoon at the start. It's like, this is what people know. Nobody knows. But I did love when they put, based on characters created by E.C. Segar, they put the little cigar in there from his actual signature. And I was like, that's a touch.
They did.
That's a decent touch there. Okay, anything else we need to say about it?
All right, well,
you have a trivia section in addition to your production section?
I've mentioned quite a bit of trivia already, but I always have more. As we said, this film cost $20 million to make in late 1970s money. That was a big deal. This film's usually considered to be a flop.
Okay.
It made $60 million at the box office.
Okay.
So 3 times its budget, which would typically be considered a success.
Sometimes budget doesn't count marketing, which is usually these days is the same amount as the budget.
I think it did. I couldn't say for sure.
Okay.
But I think perhaps it did include marketing. Is my suspicion. Okay. This is a co-production, by the way, between Paramount and Disney.
Yes, I saw the Disney credit on there.
Yeah, partly because of how expensive it was looking to be.
Okay.
Evans had to do a deal, essentially, to convince the executives at Paramount to partner up with Disney so that would defray some of the cost.
Yeah.
And also, they knew that Disney had a lot of experience with promoting and marketing a film with a cartoon connection.
Yes.
Which also the effect of making it a bit more family friendly too.
Yeah.
So I think there's one swear word. Popeye says, "Oh shit."
Yes. Why did he say that? Why was that line in the movie? I wondered when I heard it.
Allegedly, it was just missed.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then when Disney saw it, they cracked the shits.
Yeah,
and
right.
because Disney was in charge of the foreign distribution, that line was cut.
Okay.
From the international distribution.
Okay.
So I, watching it in Australia, would not have seen Popeye say, "Oh shit."
Okay.
Even
haul ass. Pappy says haul ass a couple of times. I was like, I'm surprised that's in there. Yeah.
Maybe that also was cut from the international release. Wouldn't be surprised. And I think some of the songs were also cut from the international release, which can only have improved it.
But how could they have...
I don't know.
Which songs could they cut? Because they were kind of integrated.
They could have cut any of them.
Because sometimes they start singing in the middle of like a scene.
It's true.
Yeah, I don't
Maybe
know.
the "I'm Mean" one.
Oh yeah, that's a cuttable song. I forgot about that one.
But this film, much like Dick Tracy, which also made back, I think, more than double its budget. It's because of the expectations. Okay. They thought it was going to be a big hit.
Oh, okay.
They thought it would thought it was going to be a massive success, but it wasn't. Also, the reviews. Much like Dick Tracy, we have mixed reviews.
Okay.
So some people liked it. Ebert and Siskel liked it.
Yeah. Ebert gave it 3.5 out of 4.
Amazing. What movie was he watching? But most reviewers didn't like it. And Robin Williams also vocally disliked it and would often talk about how much he disliked it throughout the rest of his career.
That's interesting because he made some of the worst movies imaginable in the 2000s and in the 90s even.
Poochie Must Die, or is that what it was called?
Yeah, Death to
Poochie? Death to Smoochie! Got there in the end.
Yeah, even that
Death
one
to
about the
Smoochie.
doctor that like makes kids laugh.
Oh, Patch Adams.
Patch Adams. They're all just like the RV, that one where he drives the RV around and just movie after Father's Day, just movie after movie of just Toys? Come on.
Toys was in the 80s. But this film was a bad experience for him.
Yeah.
So hence he didn't have fond memories of it, thus he was inclined to talk negatively about it in interviews, which he would frequently do. All of this adds up. Robin Williams' beloved figure, if he said he didn't like a thing, we're not going to like a thing. So that has contributed to its reputation as a cinematic dud, and hence why it made it into the book about Hollywood's most famous flops, despite making 3 times its budget.
Okay.
Robert Evans tried to buy cocaine during production, was arrested.
Okay.
It was the beginning of the end of his career. I think he only made 2 more movies after this, neither of which was a success. Robert Altman was sued by Paramount for going over budget.
Whoa, okay.
They sued him for $250,000.
Whoa, all right.
Alleging that he had violated an agreement, first of all, not to go over budget, and second of all, that he would pay back a percentage of the amount he went over the budget.
Okay.
It was settled out of court.
Okay.
And Altman never made another Paramount movie.
Wow. Yeah, I believe it.
Unsurprisingly. I think that's it. Are we ready to do our questions?
Yes.
All right, first of all, the comic.
The comic, boy, I couldn't stop reading them. And I kept sending you digital files.
You did. You kept saying, if you want, you can read this one.
Yeah, because I started reading into volume 2 of the Sundays. I couldn't believe it. I was having such a good time. I didn't even finish as much as I wanted to read. I kept going. I kind of stopped on the dailies a bit and then switched over to Sundays, and then, as I said, the Sundays were another level, God-level cartooning, and I absolutely loved them, and I laughed so hard reading all of them, and I wish I'd read some more, and I'm looking forward to I think there's 2 more volumes of those Sundays coming.
Wonderful. Yeah, for me, it's also a yay. This comic is funny, it's very readable, brilliantly plotted, and a piece of history.
Yeah.
So it's a yay for me too.
Yeah.
Now, the film.
Well, I'm going to say yay. I did have a good laugh at it 2 years ago. I had a real laugh at it again watching it this time around. I don't like the last 20 minutes. I think once the chase starts to rescue Sweet Pea from Bluto, it just it's trying to be zany and not getting there. I think they haven't built up to that somehow. But I found as soon as he walks into town and he's... Like, I didn't like that opening number, but everything about Robin Williams was funny. Like, all his lines were funny. Even though they were ADR, they were really... He delivered them really perfectly like Popeye, like the strips. I think he might have read the strips, because he really goes for it. That first line where he says, "You have a room for rank," and I was just like, this is...
You got a room for rank.
This is so spot on.
My boat's under the dock.
Yeah.
It's a rowboat.
Yeah, all those lines were... I really dug it, and I loved Shelley Duvall in this. I just thought she was so great, and... Ray Walston, Paul Smith,
Ray Walston's really good.
Yeah,
I also liked Ray Walston.
Yeah.
And Shelley Duvall a lot, but this is a nay for me. This film is a bizarre mess.
I think every time it's a comedy, I go yay and you go nay. I think almost consistent.
Right. No, I didn't laugh a lot in this. Very seldomly. There's my mum line.
Wait a second, what did you watch this on? Did you watch it on your phone?
I don't watch the movies on my phone.
Okay.
I watched it on my laptop.
Okay, that's not ideal viewing conditions.
It doesn't matter.
It does matter. It really does matter. You can't put it on this little screen there. You need to have a distance between you and the screen. It affects it affects the viewing, for sure.
The medium is the message for you, hey, Kumar.
It definitely affects the message, for sure.
So, I think this is... You can't put Robin Williams in a straitjacket. I felt like he was... watching his performance, I felt like he was straining against the performance that the director was requiring of him. It was almost painful to watch how subdued he was. The musical numbers are like dirges, dull and insipid. I didn't know what was going on half the time. Why was everyone being so mean to Popeye? What was happening? Why did we spend so much time on these minor characters? Nothing's fleshed out. The whole thing is a confusing mess.
I didn't have any problem following the plot for the first hour. I did have trouble. Sometimes I didn't know which character was which. That I struggled with. I think in the second half with the treasure chest, which we failed to reveal, ended up being a box of Popeye's baby stuff.
It's spinach and baby stuff.
His baby shoes.
I did laugh at how... I reckon the only time I really laughed was how both Popeye and Pappy have photos of one another, and it's just their names written on
Pap
and me, and me and son,
yeah,
and they look at it fondly.
Yeah,
I did laugh at that.
Yeah,
but
he even kisses it before it's revealed that it just says me Pappy on it.
Yeah, and the way that some of the sequences, the humorous sequences are shot, it's like a missing tooth. Bizarre. It's static, and then there'll be a burst of something that's supposed to be, cartoony, I suppose, and then it'll, like a rubber band, it'll snap back to the same kind of static, slow... No, this film is, to me, is just baffling from beginning to end, and I can't imagine I'm ever going to watch it again.
Okay.
So that's a nay for me.
Okay. Adaptation.
Nay. If we're talking about the comic strip,
yeah,
it may be a matter of record that Jules Feiffer said that he based it on the strips, but it doesn't really feel like it, aside from the hostility to spinach, the minimal involvement of spinach in the show.
Yeah.
I don't really see...
I did like how little spinach was in it.
Yeah.
In the movie.
In that sense, it's just like the comics. But in every other sense, where's the Whifflehem? Where's Jeep the Wonder Dog?
Yeah, it doesn't have the mermaids, doesn't have any of that kind of craziness.
Where's the mechanical man?
And as I mentioned, in the comics he fights a robot at one stage in a prize fight.
We had a heated discussion about this before the podcast. It can't have been a robot.
No, that's right, it's a mechanical man.
It's too soon after Chapek's play came out for it to be a robot.
But yes, I agree. There's moments where it's like the comic strip, but it is more like the cartoon, I think, probably. And also there's... it's missing a lot. And as I said, it's not really Popeye's personality for him to...
Right.
Be reluctant to fight.
He was a bruiser, like a boisterous kind of rambunctious brawler.
Yeah, and a liar. Compulsive liar, compulsive promiser and promise breaker.
In this, he's very much... we're a kind of put upon
gambling addict,
guy with a heart of gold whose refusal to let very moral.
Yes,
right. I don't think he does anything immoral in the whole film.
No. I'm trying to think.
Very different too.
Yeah.
Odd. Why turn Popeye into a paragon of morality? He's supposed to be kind of almost a little bit sleazy.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's supposed to kind of
balance him out because
balance him, or also sometimes be a little bit sleazy.
Whereas she seems a bit more unscrupulous. Yeah, well, she's definitely unscrupulous, right?
Yeah.
She's rude and running away and makes the baby bet on the horses and all sorts of stuff like very and you and was cheerfully not paying tax. And everyone else was.
So I'd say nay for adaptation as well.
There's some little parallels. The boxing is obviously there where. Boxing is a big part of the Sunday dailies, the weekend one, the
That's
Sunday
true.
strips.
Yeah.
There's even a mention to travelling to the casino and breaking the bank.
Right. Yes, there is
At the very end with Pappy and Bluto.
Yeah.
Bluto says, "We should take the baby to the casino." And Pappy says, I own the casino!
Yeah. Actually, two guys scheming against Popeye is kind of a thing that happens in the strip a lot.
Right.
As well. So maybe that's a bit where that structure came from.
Ultimately, Kumar, the real crime is it's not funny. And Thimble Theatre is funny as heck.
Yeah, I agree. It's not Thimble Theatre. It's definitely not that level of funniness. I did laugh through the first hour of it.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so please like, subscribe, rate, and review, and join our Patreon, which still has no rewards. Not even early episodes, because we only record like 2 days before they come out.
Don't say that.
But please, we need the money for these big fancy books and DVDs and stuff for some of these movies.
You gotta fund Kumar's comic lust.
Yeah.
These hardbacks aren't gonna pay for themselves.
Yep. And next week, we're going to talk about Jiu-Jitsu starring Nicolas Cage.
Nicolas Cage, comic book movie Oblivion All-Star.
Yeah, from 2020, I want to say. You're not going to find this comic. You're going to look for it, and you're not going to be able to find it digitally, physically, anywhere. I managed to find I have a scanned copy, but we'll talk about why it's so hard to find when we get to it next week.
Fantastic. Can't wait.
All right.
He's tall, good looking, and he's large. He's large.